where today I'll be talking about the final Mac that needs to be transitioned to Apple Silicon, the new M1 Mac Pro. But before we look at the future, we need to look at the past, starting with the trash can Mac Pro. This Mac Pro was undoubtedly a colossal failure, and it really stemmed out of Apple's design because anyone who wasn't on the design team would immediately phone Apple and say, "Hello, there's an issue over here." So let's see what the issue is. Some professionals expect to use computers for years, but the design means you can't. First, the thermals are terrible because of physics. You can't jam up a lot of power-hungry components into a small area and expect it to perform well. It'll probably just catch on fire because there's not enough airflow for the components to draw the heat away. Your Macs and desktops get around this by having a lot of areas, but beefy fans and radiators with lots of airflow. But Apple, in their infinite design wisdom, decided to decrease the size when half the time it's on your desk and the other half of the time it's over your desk. But still, it doesn't really matter because it's a desktop. This brings me to my other critique. You cannot upgrade it because of physics. You can't expand your computer with your PCIe expansion slots, where you can put your sound cards, storage, GPUs, Ethernet, network interface cards, and other specialized hardware. In a normal computer, like my desktop, you have a lot of area to upgrade your stuff. But with the new Mac Pro, everything would have to be external, and except for the GPU and RAM. For the RAM, you could upgrade it, but for the GPU, you couldn't even upgrade that. So with all these problems, everyone hated the Mac Pro, and it was a stain on Apple's relationships with professionals. And after this, the Pro went dark. For 4 years, Apple did not release another professional computer, and a lot of pros were very angry, and rightfully so. Some people say, go get a laptop. I say to that, you can't get a laptop because there isn't enough cooling capacity for that sweet RTX 3090 Ti. You can only get a quad core, and that's in a 15-inch system. And the Mac Pro, you can get an 8-core, and in a server at the time, you could get 12 cores. And this left pros feeling betrayed, and Apple decided to fix it with the iMac Pro, which if you've tried opening it up, well, your name is probably Louis Rossmann. It's not a good site. Glue, the exposed power supply that can kill you, destruction of your warranty, and pentalobe screws prevent you from easily repairing this thing. And if you break it, it's going to cost you your dignity. At least the thermals and performance weren't that bad, but still, something else had to come out of Cupertino. And introducing the 2019 Mac Pro and Pro Display Extreme Dynamic
It's not that
range.
good. It's not that good. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Get a PC.
Evan, the Pro Display XDR is actually a really good model.
You're wrong.
Let's continue.
LG Ultrafine 5K.
Let's continue, actually. Industrial design, check. Clarity over price, check. Get an LG Ultrafine 5K, debatable. Server option, check. Upgradable? Yes. The fact that Apple only had Intel CPUs and AMD GPUs really let down the performance, as at the time, AMD's GPU lineup was pretty lackluster, and their CPU lineup was cranking out 16-core chips that were better than Intel's 10 or 8 core, while also making 64-core behemoths that made Intel 28 cores recoil as they saw the Cinebench scores. NVIDIA's GPUs at this time had RTX and Tensor and DLSS. But if you buy a Mac Pro to play video games, what are you doing? Either way, Apple mandating AMD GPUs and Intel CPUs made the Mac Pro worse. As for the Pro Display XDR, if you do HDR content and have a Mac, get it. If you don't, well, don't. As on Windows, it's a very expensive 4K SDR monitor. But what is next? First, we'll talk about what I think will be next after the Mac Studio, which replaced the 27-inch iMac. First, what will they call it? Well, because we already have that one Pro, Max, Ultra, and Regular. So it could be the M1 Extreme or the Threadripper Pro 7995WX. But Apple did say that we were at the peak performance event that we were adding one last chip to the M1 family. So maybe it could be a P1, P standing for Pro, like how Threadripper and Xeon chips are named. This would mean that they'd have to design entirely new silicon, and the price would be extremely high, as designing this would be very hard. And the R&D cost would be astonishing. What I'd like them to do is keep the design as it looks very minimalist and sophisticated.
Yeah. Also, cheese grater, please. I want to grate my cheese on my iMac and have it go into the fans and ruin my heatsink and screw up my day. And I want to lose $33,000 since I'm your average Mac Pro buyer. I mean, what?
Okay. Okay, what? Either way,
What?
add 4 M1 Maxes together, but without the GPUs, and then add 8 M1 GPUs. Alternatively, you could just use the current M1 Ultra, maybe 2 of them, and add some PCIe lanes to add your own GPUs, and equipably fabric them together. Although you might need a new PCIe controller. Then pros would not have to deal with the fact that the applications like Blender won't have to update supporting new APIs. Because we've seen with Metal Optics that no, companies will not update their APIs unless they're physically forced to with a baseball bracket or whatever.
Bat?
Yeah, bats.
You play less sports than I do, and that's really saying something.
Yeah, but the thing is, this computer must be faster than the current Mac Pro with a Radeon W9 6900X Duo, or else pros will be very mad. And smart people would just, go purchase the old one. But also, if you're looking, in my opinion, at Ultra Fusion, well, Infinity Fabric is better in every way, except the meager, tiny, miniature bandwidth. But this is
So the most important way? Are you high on QuickBits?
No, I'm not high on QuickBits, I'm high on TechLinked.
Isn't that the same thing?
No, TechLinked is different. Also, if you're looking at my opinion, but this is not the main issue. The main issue is our RAM. You see, the Mac Pro comes up with up to 1.5 terabytes of memory, but the memory you've seen on Apple Silicon is a quaint 128 gigabytes. Some people might say, who needs 128 gigabytes of memory? And I say to them, well, A, scientific computing, where you're working with large data sets to keep a huge processor under stress.
Dude,
and
you're yelling louder than the average Intel stock cooler. You gotta stop.
Evan. Yeah, Evan.
The microphone can hear you just fine.
Yeah.
You're not gonna find a channel named The Beamwall. It's Hard Hat. It's Hard Hat. I'm telling you.
Yeah, subscribe to Hard Hat. But some people might say, who needs 128 gigabytes of RAM? And people who keep Chrome tabs open, looking at you, Evan,
I don't.
Or scientific computing, where you
Do I look like a guy who keeps Chrome tabs open? Do I?
Yeah, he does.
Oh, you do too. You look like someone who is superstitious and keeps Brave tabs open.
I don't use Chrome, and I don't use Brave.
Oh, are you too busy using Firefox? Don't Google it. Bing it.
Can I stop laughing? Okay, and with scientific computing, where you're working with giant data sets and you need a large amount of RAM to keep a processor under stress. The issue here is that the M1 memory controller only supports 128 gigs of RAM. So unless we're going to have 24 M1 Maxes together, which would be extremely latent, slow, and expensive, and also Apple probably couldn't be able to ship it, because drawing 2,000 watts is going to probably flip a circuit breaker.
And that's just for the CPUs, and that's not storage and other stuff and the coolers and the fans that are literally going to be louder than Zeph.
That's why you have your friend Evan with you.
Yes.
And you'd need a lot of DRAM chips to solder to the motherboard that might overwhelm the M1 Ultra memory controller, as there may be too many ranks and
It's
chips.
made by Apple. It's not gonna die. Duh.
It will. Causing latency in the hundreds of milliseconds. RAM is going to be a big problem, as some applications, like scientific computing, see before note, could choke and die on 128 gigs. Another concern is the latency of the RAM. It doesn't matter if you have 406 gigabytes a second of bandwidth, if cast latency is 50 milliseconds. Your CPU is just going to error and choke and blah out.
It's gonna Zeph.
Yeah, it's gonna Zeph. And that's because it can't get the access to the data it needs fast enough. So, the M1 Ultra uses LPDDR5 chips clocked at 6,400 megatransfers per second. It's different from megahertz, okay? It's different from megahertz. It would make this, but if we had socketed CPUs and RAM, it would make
That's
this.
not possible.
It is possible.
No, it's not.
Evan, I did the research on this video.
The
I
world
scripted
is
it.
an integrated.
It would
Alright.
make their SKUs make a lot more sense. If we could even have one half-height PCIe slot with 1x bandwidth at Gen 3 speeds, that would mean that it would be possible to install faster Ethernet, fiber, sound cards, and other specialized hardware. Or you could even run RAID. Or you could even run a different GPU if Apple doesn't do what Apple always does and makes GPUs proprietary. See the LTT video on that. If Apple does not include more ports that aren't USB-C or Thunderbolt 3, you might just be stuck living in Dongleville forever, filled with octopus desks and the cries of cable management folks everywhere. But there's one final issue: thermals.
No! Gosh, please, gosh, no.
No! The RTX 3090 Ti has a rated TDP of 480 watts, and the M1 Ultra 280 watts. The M1 Extreme would use more than 280 watts, which means some giant coolers with massive vapor chambers and heat pipes. Thicker than the average PVC tube. Traditional computers get around this by having their heat-generating components separated from each other, but that much power on one integrated circuit could require water cooling, which is the first time water.
Nah, just put it in a hydraulic press.
Or do diamond cooling. Very expensive, but sounds very Apple-y. And that would be the first time water is in a Mac since the Power Mac G5. Another thing is how the CPUs will be arranged in a package. Inevitably, Apple would want to make the dies as close together as possible to cut down on latency. The closer the CPUs, the less latency, because physics obviously takes less energy to go, and it's quicker to go from a shorter distance to a longer distance. And the line arrangement would give problems if, let's say, one core on one end needed a core from the other end. That would take a lot of energy and be extremely latent. A Square could fix this, but we'd have to move the DRAM chips. We could also stack the CPUs on top of each other, except that would bring the issues of thermals, since we'd be having twice the power with the same surface area to radiate the heat. So, yeah, all arrangements would have their downsides, and I don't know which would be best. But if this video was a wish list, I'd want more I/O, Socrates CPUs, GPUs, RAM, and storage, and support for the AVX 512 instruction set.
Intel.
But for most people, that's reasonable. For example, non-integrated GPUs would add latency instead of the GPUs being integrated, and having it way off in the middle of the motherboard is going to take a lot longer than having it right on die. And if you think your Mac computer is going to be great for gaming, I'm sorry, it isn't. See LTT video number 2, because Apple's
You're pointing to the wrong corner. It's up there.
Oh.
I'm pointing for him.
CLTD video number 2. For example, because game devs aren't going to be developing programs for stuff that less than 30% of people are going to be using. And Apple's just going to say, use the App Store, but game devs also won't want to give 30% of their income up. And
No, you just still play like Clash Royale on a device that costs more than you do.
Well, it would spend a lot more time doing it, and it just wouldn't be enough to actually do everything. But overall, the new Mac Pro would be slated for a WWDC release, and if true, that'd be a very excited June. Please like and subscribe, and so that you can have a great day, have a great week. My name is Zeph, this is Jay-Z Tech, and goodbye!